So today I'd like to talk about why the world is so chaotic right now. And one of the reasons I like to make I'm trying to make these videos is because I at least want to put my voice in as a counterbalance to the oversimplified platitudes that are blasted around the news media, social media. There's just so many people that are just stuck on these ideological memes. Let's call them that. So, there's a lot of things happening. There's cultural fights going on. There's economic fights going on. There's ecological transformations occurring. There's planetary level climate changes happening. And all of that is congealed together in this time to make this time a very chaotic time. And here's the thing that I guess this is the main. If you take nothing away from this talk other than this, here's the main point. You and I are both going to have it, and everyone is going to have a tendency to want to oversimplify that. We're going to want to take it down to, God damn it, if it just wasn't for Donald Trump, then we could work this all out. Or if you're a conservative, if it just wasn't for, the liberal agenda. This is for Americans, because this is unfortunately the world we live in, where everybody's just like trying to split things into two camps. So that way of thinking, no matter which side you're on, and full disclosure, I'm center left, with kind of radical environmentalist as well. But I'm not radical. I would say I'm highly conservative in the sense that I believe in honoring the systems that have existed long before our technological advances. I reject the notion. That's interesting. I reject the notion that being strong on the environment somehow makes you radical or progressive. I would say it's the most conservative thing that you can be. If you're strong on environmental protection, that means you want to conserve the status quo of nature, of the vitality of natural systems. So yeah, I am conservative. I am highly environmentally conservative. So let me see if I can get back on track after that little rant. So if you take one thing away from this talk, that one thing would be, I really don't like it when people speed up behind me. It's like, okay, go ahead. I guess I used to be that guy when I was in my 20s and I had too much testosterone I didn't know what to do with. Okay. So if you take one thing away from this talk, it is this. You're gonna be seduced emotionally by ideas that make you feel a sense of certainty around yourself. So I'm going to talk about Jordan Peterson a little bit. So Jordan Peterson, I'm sure many of you know, all of you know who Jordan Peterson is. Jordan Peterson is so right about a bunch of stuff and so wrong about a bunch of stuff. And I say that with all humility, because I really respect the stories that he's based a lot of his ideas on. And most people these days don't know about Joseph Campbell. So Joseph Campbell was one of the most amazing intellects of our time. And he took all of the stuff that Jordan Peterson studied 10 times more. I think that's safe to say. I visited his library and seen the notes in all of his books, and it's insane. I mean, the library is humongous, and you open up every book, and there's handwritten notes on the pages of every single book practically. All the great spiritual traditions, all of the philosophy of his time, which is, he died in the 80s, so everything up until the 80s. But what am I saying about Jordan Peterson? I cried. The first time I heard Jordan Peterson really talk about some deep psychological concepts and mythological concepts, I was brought to tears because they were things that I had wanted to say and had not said, and was not able to articulate them in a way, and he articulated them better than anyone I had ever heard. So I critique Jordan Peterson from a position of being someone who's completely seduced by his message. Now, here's the thing about Jordan Peterson's message. He, by his own accounts, believes that the world should be organized around the story of Cain and Abel from the Bible. So we all, and this is another interesting thing about that, we all live inside of a story. The story being conscious or unconscious. So Jordan Peterson is trying to remake the world in the lessons of the story of Cain and Abel. But the thing that he doesn't talk about is that the Canaanites were goddess people. They were earth lovers. So the Bible and the Torah, whatever, that whole Middle Eastern tradition, they were the people that won the war. And they rewrote the history in their image. And in their image, they completely eliminated the mother, feminine, goddess, nature, chaos, Kali, whatever you want to call it. That aspect of spirituality is completely decimated from the culture. So religion and culture are the same thing back in those. There's no difference between a religion and culture in those early iterations of human civilization. So they eliminated the feminine. And if you look at that in its most extreme form, it's what's left in Islam, where women are supposed to cover their whole entire beings because of the chaotic natural birth and sexual energy force that they represent. Now, people like to think that somehow Islam is way different than Judaism and Christianity, but you've got to understand that there's similarities too. Now, one of the fundamental similarities is that 3,500 years ago, all reference to the mother goddess was eliminated from the religious texts. It was eliminated. And that happens when a civilization is born, not completely, like civilizations are born, then accent on the masculine, the hierarchy, the order of civilization, that occurs. That's natural. But in the Middle East, with Judaism, Islam, and with Christianity, that element is completely removed. So you don't have the mother and the father anymore in the spiritual dynamic. You have the Father, the Son, and the Spirit, and those are all masculine. Everything's supposed to be masculine. So when I talk about Jordan Peterson, the limitations of Jordan Peterson, one of his fundamental limitations is his disregard for the importance of the feminine energy. And that feminine energy being the earth energy, the birth energy, the chaotic energy. In that way of thinking, which is those Middle Eastern traditions, that way of thinking, the earth, that feminine power is to be sublimated. Eve is she's in league with the devil. She's an evil force. So that's what you've got to understand when you're talking about. I guess this talk's just about Jordan Peterson again. You've got to understand when you're listening to Jordan Peterson that underneath everything he's saying, the feminine aspect is the devil. I'm going to repeat that again. Everything. And all of them, those really hardcore Old Testament-y type people, the feminine aspect is evil. And so everything they say revolves around the anti-feminine. So I'm going to say a little bit about my own journey in that. I feel the seduction of Jordan Peterson because in my early years, there was a lot of feminine energy. I was in LA, where Elon Musk's children, elder children were, and there was a lot of, feminine stuff being thrown in my face, especially if you're a sensitive person, especially if you're open and you're open-minded and you're trying to incorporate a lot of new ideas and be an evolved human being like I was and I continue to be, I got super confused. I was totally confused. I didn't know how to handle this feminine energy. And it was like, what should I be questioning my masculinity? And, you know, in a way, I went through that process and I was in a lot of pain. And so I have a lot of sympathy for men, for young men who are in a lot of pain, who are gravitating towards this high level, I don't want to say high level, this toxic, I'm gonna call it toxic masculinity, because it's toxic. It's like you're basically hurting women or denying the power of women so that you can feel good about yourself. You know, there's entire cultures that revolve around that. You know, I have to say, in all fairness, like in the Judeo-Christian systems, I don't really know much about Islam, and I don't know that they're doing that at all, but there is sort of, it circles back around, and then they bring the feminine back in terms of, you know, the Virgin Mary, which is, again, it's a virgin. It's not the actual earth essence. So, you know, and in Judaism, there's the matriarchy, which holds, you know, the purse and the power and the culture. So there is an honoring of the feminine in some forms of modern Judaism, and maybe ancient Judaism too, and in some forms of Christianity, especially like the South American forms of Christianity, where they've fused them with the local traditions in which they honor the earth. So you can see that happening, but in the way that Jordan Peterson relates to it, there's no space for the sacred feminine. It's to be controlled. You know, and I brought up in my last talk, and I feel a little bad about that, his health issues, but I have to say, it's almost like he's in battle with his own body. And, you know, our bodies are like, they're the earth, you know, and this is kind of the crazy thing that I wish people could understand. I wish men could understand. We get to run civilization. Like, that's the truth. Men run civilization. I mean, a few times it's women here, but the women who run civilization, who get in positions of power, they're very masculine. But the masculine element runs civilization. But you know what? That's all embedded inside of the feminine nature body. You know, if you go and raise the entire earth and destroy all the nature around, we're screwed. We're totally screwed. It's not going to work. You know, we can control some of it, and that's the thing that I guess I'm just going to stay around Jordan Peterson's ideas. Like, Jordan Peterson is an individual. I don't know him. He seems like a perfectly decent human being. I'm not trying to diss Jordan Peterson. I'm just trying to be a counter voice to the where I see he goes off the rails. Because when he's dealing with the psychology and those psychological dynamics and the Jungian ideas, I think he's totally right on. But where I see he misses it is this insistence that control and hierarchy and that the masculine dynamic needs to be everything. But it's got to be a lot. For us men, especially, you know, I spent in my early years when I was dealing with these energies of, you know, masculine and feminine, and, you know, how do I actually find my masculine energy? I did like 2 years in a pretty hardcore men's program, pretty dogmatic, and it was important. And I needed to distinguish myself as distinct and different from women. You know, like, there was so much energy in LA at that time, and probably still is, about the sort of universal human condition beyond masculine and feminine. But, you know, you've got to honor both. They're both true. There is a universal condition that applies to both men and women, and then there's distinct differences that apply to men or women, or the masculine or the feminine. And you know, the thing about Jordan Peterson is that he's not I guess he's just being the counter voice to this idea that, we're all one, we're all non-binary. Everything, it doesn't matter whether you're a man or a woman or whatever, which is fine. Like, I'm totally fine with that. I don't have a problem with that at all. But what I do have a problem with, and what I think we really need as a culture, is we need to honor both the masculine and the feminine pretty much equally. That's where the real wealth happens. And back to like what I was talking about in terms of the so the person that made the comment about how these talks are all over the place, this one's even worse. But I'm just gonna keep talking, and hopefully people will point out where I need to narrow my talks to. The thing about civilization is, we really, the masculine element, and this is the thing, I don't hear people talking about this. Masculine is civilization. Like, it is. That's the way it works. Feminine is nature. There's, throughout all of time, that's the way it's been characterized. Is it because it's an accurate assessment. But you don't get, the most abundant civilizations have the highest respect for the nature, for the systems that support us, for cooperation. I've said this in the other videos before. Capitalism works best inside of a cooperative environment. Hey, I'm gonna say it this way. Capitalism works best inside of a communist environment. You put a communist environment where, and I'm not talking about authoritarianism. Do not misrepresent me. Not authoritarianism, but commonality, the commons, the air that we all share, the roads that we all drive on, the international waters that we all share. The commons are agreed upon, we find, I heard recently, was listening to deliberative democracy. We do the difficult work to find common ground. From the common ground, then competition works, then capitalism works. But if you just go to capitalism and you forget the common ground and the structure that holds it up, you live in dumb ideological platitudes. I'm sorry, people, if you're behind Donald Trump, he does not know economics. Capitalism is a fantasy if you're saying it's just free trade, because it's never free trade. It's always embedded inside of some system of rules, which creates losers and winners inside of that system. It's never a fair playing field. You got to keep working with those systems of rules so that the common interest, the common good is served by the competition. All right, that's enough.